Hello, and welcome to another episode of Be a Leader podcast, where we talk about current events in sports, military, and business. We're going to talk about May 2nd, 3 a.m. in the morning, here in 2026. Spirit Airlines ceased all operations. Their last plane landed, and they were shut down. The pioneer of ultra discount flights in the United States was done. And from a leadership perspective, this was a failure. Right? It was not just bad luck. Yes, there was a lot of issues that happened over the period of time, and things got out of hand as the Iran war made gas prices, fuel prices for jet fuel spike. But again, it wasn't just that. It was many different issues. They had been in bankruptcy at least twice in the last 2.5 years. They were negotiating a $500 million bailout from the U.S. government. The Trump administration was divided. The bondholders of Spirit Airlines didn't even want it, and that's part of the reason why they ceased to exist to this day. And when the prices of fuel just went up, it was the end for Spirit Airlines. They ran out of cash. So here's the thing: the Iran war did not kill Spirit Airlines. Okay, the fuel prices were just the final blow for Spirit Airlines. They were already dying from self-inflicted wounds. It was bad strategy, operational failure, having no financial cushion. The brand was in trouble. And so when the crisis hit, they had almost like no option other than hoping that someone would come and save them. And no one did. So let's look about what we can learn from Spirit Airlines. We're talking about 5 things that we learned from them that we can apply either to ourselves professionally or to our personal lives. But let's learn from what happened in Spirit Airlines. The first thing when I think about Spirit Airlines was we cannot have a plan that only works with ideal conditions. That was part of the challenge for them. They needed ideal conditions. What were they? Well, they needed to make sure that they had no weather delays, that the planes were full of people, right? That they were paying extra for all the little extra things that were offered available for the flights for the passengers. They needed to make sure that fuel prices were steady and hopefully low too. And this is hard, right? How can you possibly have all these things? And let's not mention no pandemic, right? No one wants a pandemic, but they needed ideal conditions. If you think about the airline industry, they have razor thin margins, one of the worst margins in all different types of industries. And so when you're playing a game with already low margins and you're going to have even lower margins because you're an ultra discounted carrier, it makes it very challenging. They needed very good conditions. And when the war happened and that affected fuel prices, well, then they were just burning cash more than they could possibly do. To quote the CEO, he said, everyone's burning cash. We just have a smaller pot to play with to burn through. Everyone's going to be hurting, but we're the worst ones because we just have less cash. And that's the challenge between having a fragile strategy and a resilient strategy. You got to have a resilient strategy. You can't just plan for things when things go well, because oftentimes they don't. We have surprises. We have other conditions. We have things outside of control. We need to have set up in case things go crazy and go different. I think about my story when I was building a space hardware startup a few years ago. I remember meeting another founder just to kind of get some experience, to learn from other people's experience. And one of the things he said that was resonated with me, and I share it now with people that I work with, he said, you're going to burn more cash than you think. Things are more expensive than you think. And things take longer than you think. He says, whatever you think you need to raise, whatever that number is, double it. It's better to have that already there and that flexibility with cash than having to go and continuously beg for more money, because things just cost more and take longer than you think. That's part of having a resilient plan rather than just having the best case scenario, right? Having when everything goes right. So that was the story I had. I also think about my time in the Marine Corps. We have to plan, we have to mitigate for so many things. We don't plan for the best case. We plan for the worst case. What happens if this goes down? What happens if these people go down? What happens if this backup plan doesn't work? We have to have multiple plans. It needs to be resilient because we are operating in austere conditions. By very definition, we have to have a resilient plan. So it's one of those things. If you have a fragile plan, at some point, it will no longer survive. And that's exactly what we see here with Spirit Airlines. The second thing I think about with Spirit Airlines is we cannot fall on the trap of our strength becoming our trap. Okay, this is a key issue that I see in many places. But let's talk about Spirit Airlines. They were the pioneer, right, in 2006 of the ultra discount, at least here in the United States, having a very discounted plan in place. Their strength started becoming a prison because their brand was the ultra discount. It becomes a price war. Then other entrants come in and also want to have low prices, right? So they get stuck because that's their brand. It's just having the cheapest flights available. Then what other entrants got in here, but the biggest challenge was when the legacy carriers started to offer their basic economy, trying to be similar to Spirit, but yet have better things. So where Spirit Airlines had seats that were this thin, you still had the thicker seats from the other legacy carriers. Plus, you still had beverages and they were more comfortable overhead bins. So all the things that Spirit would nickel and dime you, which we'll talk about here in a moment, wasn't there for the legacy carriers, but they're still offering this basic economy. So in essence, Spirit put the brand in on being ultra discounted. And then others were able to enter it and offer better services, also at a discounted price. It became very hard for Spirit to evolve. They tried to evolve later with some different seating options at the front of the plane later on, but it was almost too late. And here's the challenge I see with a lot of individuals, especially. What got you here isn't going to get you there. Okay. It is easy to have early success and then think that it's going to continue or that you can have success in other areas. And this is a big fallacy. Previous success is not an indication of future success. Oftentimes, what happens is we create these blind spots because we think, oh, it's worked before. I can do it again. I can do it elsewhere. I can do it here. And we start to make these assumptions and we miss these blind spots. And that's where a lot of issues can happen. That's why coaching is so important because it can help start to test a lot of the assumptions that you have and also try to find some of those blind spots you have. Because again, what got you here won't get you there. And oftentimes people that are stuck, people that I work with and coach with, they have been getting stuck to the point where they can't deal with it anymore and they want to reach out and get some help, someone with some experience from different industries, different backgrounds that can pressure test it and help them see what they cannot see because their past success is making them hostage. It's making them stuck, but they know they can get to the next level. Your Spirit Airline got stuck and their strategy was their trap and part of their demise. So let's learn from that as we can take off from this episode. So let's move on to the third point here. Your brand is very important. You almost don't need to say it, but it is, and we need to talk about it right now. Your brand is very important, and part of the brand should be your operational excellence. Operational excellence, consistency builds trust, and that makes your brand very trustworthy. Part of the issues with Spirit was they didn't have that great of an operational track history. Yes, flying planes is a difficult industry. You're still very limited to things like power, weather, diseases, I suppose, right? But there are some things that are outside of control. But the challenge here with Spirit was even in the best of times, they still weren't very operationally well. Sure, there's going to be some fanboys of Spirit, but I would say that the majority of people who fly Spirit didn't want to fly with Spirit. It was just the necessary evil because it was the cheapest flight. I remember I took one flight back when I was doing a lot of traveling for the Marine Corps. We trained in different places for operational stuff. I did one flight with them because I figured, hey, this is really cheap. It'll save me some money so I can have a little bit more cushion because when I travel, the reimbursement is cut. There is not like whatever you spend. It's you have a specific allotment and you're flying to places like Los Angeles, your dollar doesn't stretch very large. So you are always at a deficit. So you got to plan very effectively. And I remember I tried Spirit one time and the seats were super thin and they were charging me for just bringing in one of my bags and the luggage, the food, paying for water. It was a big commotion. It was a very poor experience, so much so that I said, I'm never going to do this flight ever again. Some people have to, but the branding is what we're known for. Okay, what we do is what we're known for. We are our habits, we are our practices, and in the business world, we are our operational tempo. Like how trustworthy are we? The brand is a lagging indicator of how you perform. I talk about my IBR framework frequently. Identity, behavior, results. We want to have a very strong identity and we want to have alignment with the behaviors, and then the results take care of themselves. They are a lagging indicator, but we have to focus on what our identity is and what are going to be our behaviors. We want alignment in that, and that creates a lot of power. Here, with Spirit Airlines. They were not very good operationally. And having operational excellence builds trust, and that gives you time. And there just wasn't trust. Their own bondholders didn't even believe in the company. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. IBR is so important. That's why in the Marine Corps, we're so big on building a very strong identity and then working through behaviors over and over and over and over with a lot of training so that when you go to combat, it's who you are. Okay, you're not stepping up to anything else other than who you already are, because there's such a strong alignment between identity and behavior. So let's go on to the fourth point. Financial cushion is not an option. And I think this is something that's important both for businesses, but also personally. Having some kind of financial cushion is important. Spirit Airlines didn't. They had so much debt. They were at so much debt, it almost became impossible to be able to get more debt for them. The fuel shock really hurt them. It was a death spiral. But let's talk about this for a moment. There was an opportunity for the U.S. government to bail out Spirit Airlines for $500 million for 90% equity. 90% equity is almost the entire company. Right? And even in that midst, the Trump administration was having a hard time figuring out if this was even worth it. Is it even valuable to have an airline? This airline, okay, not just any airline, but this airline. It was hard to say, yeah, we own 90%. Is that even going to, is there any value in there? That's how burdened in debt they were and the operational ineffectiveness that they had. So it showed problems. When cash buys time, and time gives you options. Okay? And they were really short. They had no cash. They had no cash. Again, I talked about startups. You want to have that runway so you can do stuff. Cash is the liquidity to do things. And they didn't have any liquidity. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't even operate anymore. I also want to mention something about banks, especially for those that are trying to build companies or trying to have mature companies, or even on the personal side. When I talk to bankers, they don't like you to come in with a crisis. Bankers want to have as much guarantee as possible that you can pay back the loan. So the wrong time to go to a bank is when you need the loan. The best time to go to the bank is when you don't need the loan. When you're doing well operationally, when you're doing well financially, you can provide your financial statements, you show them and you create some kind of line of credit for the rainy days. Okay, that's the best time to get a loan. And in this case, they were in a crisis trying to get cash. It was the worst time. It was the worst time because we were so needy. Okay, and it didn't work out. No cash, no business, no Spirit Airlines. So something that we can all learn from this episode. And that goes on to our fifth lesson learned from Spirit Airlines. Okay, don't wait until there's a crisis to come up with a crisis plan. I mean, it almost sounds obvious, but it has to be said. Well, the CEOs talked about how they had an Alpha plan, a Bravo plan, and a Charlie plan. But what didn't you know? They never even got to get to Charlie. That's poor leadership right there. You got to be able to create plans so you can at least hit all those wickets in worst case scenarios. They never even got to the third option, Charlie. Okay? That's how much of a crisis they were. The fatal mistake was them hoping that someone was going to save them. Does that sound familiar? No one's coming to save you. Okay, you got to have plans in case no one's coming to save you. Yes, it'd be easy to look back at 2024 with the Department of Justice at a different time, different administration, looked at a potential merger between JetBlue and Spirit Airlines. And they denied it because they were afraid the consumer was going to have to pay more. Well, now what do you know? The consumer's going to have to pay more because Spirit isn't allowed. They're not around anymore. They ain't flying no more. And there was a study done by Frontier that said that any flights that Spirit left and Frontier was able to carry, or was already doing, carried on that load, Frontier was making 3 to 5% more per flight after Spirit left. Well, what do you know? Spirit's gone permanently. Frontier's going to make more money on all their flights. In fact, United also put out something. They're going to make more money out of all their flights too. Now that the base floor is gone, the floor is going to bump up, and that's going to hurt everyone. That's part of the reason why, when we can look back at 2024, that option was a better option maybe that the DOJ considered at the time. But regardless, Spirit was hoping that someone was going to come save them. And that is not a good plan. That is not a good plan. Resiliency has to come from advance. You have to pre-plan it. Failing to plan is planning to fail. term we used a lot in the Marine Corps. We have to plan. I tell you, one time when I was in the Marine Corps, I was in Iraq, there was an operation that was being planned. And I remember this specifically because we're kind of in that group for the contingency for the medevac. So if there was casualties in this operation, how do we get these casualties out? So the point being is they had a primary plan, a secondary plan, and a tertiary plan. All three of these plans came from different entities, from different locations in Iraq with different modes of transportation. It was very robust because the assumption was there's going to be some type of casualties if we're going to have a conflict, and we need a plan for it. The resiliency was planned ahead of time. It wasn't, oh, someone's gone down, I need someone help with Joe Smuckatelli, right? They had to have the plan up front. And this is what Spirit Airlines failed to do. They did not have a good plan. They were trying to make plans when things were going downhill. And this is something that we can all learn from. So here's our 5 takeaways. Hopefully you can see the whiteboard. And it is a little bit wordy, so I apologize. It should have been a little bit more succinct. But the first one, don't build a strategy that only works when everything goes right. There's always going to be challenges. That's part of life. That's part of the journey. It's part of being a leader. Again, I talked about before, leaders are there to solve problems. Don't have a plan that only works when everything aligns. Okay, that is a plan to fail. Okay. Second one, don't let your strengths become your trap. We all want to look at our strengths and learn from our strengths. We often learn more from our failures, but it's so easy to assume that the prior success is going to guarantee or lead to future success. Again, what got you here isn't going to get you there. That's something we can learn here from Spirit Airlines. The third one, your brand matters. Your brand is a lagging indicator of your practices, of your habits, of what you're known for. Okay, you can create a brand all you want, but it's really a lagging indicator. And that's why I focus so much on having that tightness in my IBR framework. Tight identity and aligned behaviors leads to the results, which is your brand. They had a poor brand, it wasn't a very liked brand, poor operational, and poor financially, and that led to their demise. So something we can learn from that. And that leads on to the next one. Financial cushion is not optional. No cash, no business, no flying. They literally grounded at 3 a.m. on a Saturday strategically, knowing that it was a very low day of flying, so they could try to make sure that their employees got out before they were mobbed. This was a complete failure. Oh my goodness. And so having some financial cushion is very important. You can't be asking for cash when you got nothing left. All right. Plan ahead. And that leads to the fifth one. Don't wait till a crisis to build resilience. And I would say not only does this apply to a business, it applies to you personally in your personal life. Don't reach out when it's almost too late. Don't reach out when it's a crisis. If you start feeling that you're starting to go down the slope, reach out to someone. There's people in your world who care about you and care about your success, and they don't want to see you go down a deep, deep hole. Reach out. A lot of times, the coaches that I've talked to became coaches because they were down at the bottom of a hole. They couldn't dig any deeper, and they had to reach out, and the power of coaching changed their lives. Right? So that's often why some people get in coaching. But these are things that we can learn from this episode of Be a Leader podcast about Spirit Airlines. So, of course, I said again, this is not bad luck. This is leadership failure. Spirit was already dead. They just didn't know it yet. It took the Iran war to spike those prices to really get it going because they were just, their ship was falling, right? They were down. So questions that we can learn from here. Again, the first one, is your strategy robust or is it fragile? Next one, are you trapped by what has made you successful in the past? Third one, are you building trust through consistency and operational excellence? Fourth, do you have some kind of financial cushion plan in place? And fifth, are you building resiliency before you need it? Before I left McKinsey & Company, one of the biggest questions I was being asked by clients was, how do we make ourselves more resilient? We don't want to have to go through another COVID-19 and try to figure it out. How can we be more resilient? Resiliency was the top topic during the last period of time when I was at McKinsey & Company. We can learn from Spirit Airlines, okay? Don't wait till it's too late. Don't wait till you're like Spirit Airlines, who had to lose 15,000 jobs. 15,000 jobs that have their own families, right, had their own compensation, that lost their health insurance, that aren't getting answers on a timely basis. 15,000 families are being affected by the leadership failure of Spirit Airlines. Not to mention the consumers who are trying to fly them, had tickets already, got stranded at airports, all that. Just 15,000 jobs lost from the leadership failure of Spirit Airlines. We can learn from that. So, and I get it, high pressure situations can be tough. right? And confidence is a huge component of being able to lead in crisis situations. And if you feel like you're not very good at your confidence, you don't feel confident, you haven't built that muscle, because it is a muscle. My program, the Confident Leader Bootcamp, will help you, guaranteed help you build confidence, build your leadership, and help you feel like you can do it. I just opened up enrollment. Our next cohort's a live 10-week cohort when we learn in a group led by me. We start in June. Take a look at the link in the description for more information on how to join this program. But I really encourage you to take the lessons learned from this episode. Thank you for watching. Please comment on the biggest takeaway you had. It'd be great to hear your perspective. Please share it with someone else so they can also learn from it. And please like it. If you like this episode, it helps make sure that more people see it and we can all learn from Spirit Airlines. So with that being said, remember, whether you're leading yourself, leading others, or leading leaders, be a leader. My name is Pinedo. Thank you so much. Until next time.